Hello, very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
The headlines for you at 6. Good morning, it's Monday the 19th of October. The top story for you this morning, a short national lockdown across Wales, which has been described as a firebreak, could be announced as early as this morning.
The restrictions are expected to last for 2 to 3 weeks and may include an instruction for people to stay at home. It follows talks over the last couple of days about how best to tackle rising cases of coronavirus. Here's our Wales correspondent, Hal Griffith.
Tens of millions of pounds expected to be made available to Greater Manchester to try and persuade local officials to accept the highest level of coronavirus restrictions.
The government spent the last few days in a standoff with the region's mayor, Andy Burnham, who fears that the measures will cause severe economic harm. Our deputy political editor, Vicky Young, has the latest. It's 6:10. Let's have a catch-up with the weather with Carol. And the autumn leaves are lovely at the moment, aren't they, Carol? Morning.
Morning.
Aren't they?
Sweet Carol, thank you very much. See you a bit later.
Thank you. So schools in Northern Ireland are beginning an extended half-term break today. Children will have 2 weeks holiday instead of 1.
That extension is part of the devolved government's measures to try to bring down the coronavirus infection rate, which is the highest of the UK's 4 nations. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has been speaking to students, teachers and some parents. What's the breakfast like there, Nina?
Let's get you up to date on the latest news, and tens of millions of pounds in extra funding could be on offer to Greater Manchester to break the deadlock over whether it should move into the highest level of coronavirus restrictions.
What a superstar.
A viewer.
There are quite a few out there, Louise.
Yeah, I know. A few million. Everyone counts.
Oh, wasn't that lovely? Thank you so much to Edmund for speaking to us this morning. Happy birthday to him as well. Let's pick up on some of the things actually.
He's going to receive. It's going to be
1 or 2, I think. Yeah.
hundreds of thousands, isn't it? Sally's here again. Morning.
That's 3 days, so.
Exactly.
There you go.
It's 6:48 and we've seen some lovely autumnal leaves with Carol this morning. And how's the weather doing? Morning.
Good morning.
Carol, nice little update for the few days ahead as well. Speak to you later.
Thanks.
Now, in a surprising find, scientists have discovered that cold water swimming could protect the brain from degenerative diseases like dementia.
It's all to do with the production of a specific protein. Well, our chief environment correspondent, Justin Rowlatt, who is a keen cold water swimmer himself, is at the Parliament Hill Lido Lido. Is it Lido or Lido? I can never remember in London. Good morning, Justin. Yeah.
I'll ask you later about how long, how cold, etc., but it's fascinating.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But right now we need to do the news, the travel and the weather, wherever you're watching. Headlines in just a moment.
Very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
The headlines for you at just gone 7 o'clock. Good morning, it's Monday, it's the 19th of October. Top story for you today is that tens of millions of pounds is expected to be made available to Greater Manchester to try and persuade local officials to accept the highest level of coronavirus restrictions.
The government has spent the last few days in a standoff with the region's mayor, Andy Burnham, who fears that the measures will cause severe economic harm. Community Secretary Robert Jenrick will hold further discussions today. We'll speak to him at 7:30. Our deputy political editor, Vicky Young, has the latest. 12 minutes past 7. Carol's looking at the weather for us this morning, and I'm just loving these autumnal leaves, really, yeah. Carol. Morning.
Good morning, both. Good morning.
And Carol, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So it's fast approaching 7:15. It's Monday morning, and after days of uncertainty, the standoff between the government and Greater Manchester over its coronavirus restrictions level could be edging a little closer to a compromise this morning.
Tens of millions of extra pounds are expected to be made available from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, after pressure from local leaders who'd resisted a move into the highest alert level. Let's speak now to one of them, Labour Councillor Sean Field.
It's 7:45. Let's find out what's happening with the weather. Carol's got it for us this morning, Carol, and for quite a few people out there today, it's going to be quite a mild start to the week, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's 8 minutes past 8. Carol's got the weather for us today. Carol, you having a problem with your voice today? What do you need? What can we do for you?
Dan, if you send me loads of honey, that's...
Have a little nice cup of tea. That'll help. Thank you.
Nice brew. Nice brew puts everything right, isn't it? It's 8:10. Now, it's been a week since Boris Johnson announced new COVID alert levels would be introduced across England.
The new...
Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with questions about this tiered system and how it might affect you. To help us answer some of those, we're joined by Professor Shah.
Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your questions as well you've been sending in. We'll try and do those. We've done quite a few of them, haven't we? The sort of Q&A sessions with our experts over the last few months, and I'm sure we will continue to do those in the coming weeks and months ahead.
Schools in Northern Ireland are beginning an extended half-term break today. Children will have 2 weeks holiday instead of one.
That extension is part of the devolved government's measures to try and bring down the coronavirus infection rate, which is the highest of all the UK's 4 nations. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has been speaking to students, to parents and teachers.
So that's the situation in Northern Ireland. Across the UK, millions of families would normally be enjoying a half-term break or perhaps planning a trip around this time of year.
Things are just very different at the moment, aren't they?
Yep.
Nina is actually at a holiday park today. She's in Cumbria to find out how the new restrictions are affecting bookings, Nina. And this is something so many of our viewers would have been thinking they might be able to do, but, you know, welcome to 2020.
Same boat, aren't you? Does that help?
Yeah, of course. And
The spot here, but I know, you know, when you're sort of having your sort of private meetings with Harvey, you'll be very honest with him. So we know what his strengths are. What are his weaknesses? What does he need to work on?
He's still talking. He's still talking. I love that.
I think they're getting on quite well, aren't they? That's nice.
Cast your mind back to, I don't know, when it was big. It was lockdown, wasn't it? You might remember these wonderful Kashmiri goats taking over the empty streets of Llandudno.
Images of roaming animals gained worldwide attention, and now they're being used to fundraise for St David's Hospice in the town. Here's Mairead Smith with more.
I love those goats.
Is that one of your stories of the year?
Well, I have done a bike ride where they live around Great Orme, and they're just there, and they're incredible. And it is possibly my story of the year, Dan.
Well, that's lovely. And thank you to Millie and Janet as well, so 2 of the stars of that little film.
So it's a surprising find that scientists have discovered that cold water swimming could protect the brain from degenerative diseases like dementia.
This is all to do with the production of a specific protein. Well, our chief environment correspondent, Justin Rowland, who is a keen cold water...
So many questions for Justin. I think he's agreed to try and answer some of them. How long do you have to swim for? How cold does it have to be? Absolutely, literally answered about 3 that I wanted. So thank you very much. You can carry on. I think you're going to get in a minute on the science of it as well. And there is that video we talked about. He talked, didn't he, about cold water shock. That video which we've put out so many times on Breakfast, which is how to survive if you do, by mistake, fall into cold water.
Well
and we'll
caught,
put it out again.
We need to apologise to Carol. We're late. Carol, we're late for the weather. We're so sorry.
See you tomorrow.
You're watching BBC Breakfast. It's 8:59.
And let's have a last look at the news headlines for you. And Community Secretary Robert Jenrick says a conclusion needs to be reached today with leaders in Greater Manchester about moving to the highest level of coronavirus restrictions.
The government has spent the last few days in a standoff with the region's mayor, that's Andy Burnham, who fears that the measures will cause severe economic harm. Well, our political correspondent Ian Watt, there'll be coverage of that throughout the day right across the BBC News for you.
Plenty more. On Breakfast, we're talking to Colin Jackson, actually. He's done a panorama programme about eating disorders. That's coming up in a moment.
Yes, and he's going to be with us. But before that, a brief last look at the headlines wherever you're watching.
Welcome back. Now, from athletics to gymnastics, many from the world of professional sport have opened up about their struggles with eating disorders.
Olympic hurdler Colin Jackson explores the pressure facing those in top-level sport. This is all in a new BBC Panorama documentary. He talks about his own struggles as well at the peak of his career. We'll speak to Colin in a moment, but first, here's a special report from our sport correspondent Natalie Perks.
Well, so many issues are touched upon there. Let's speak to Colin Jackson.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning both.
I mean, it's absolutely, it's fascinating to see you talk about this and be so honest about this, Colin. I mean,
Would be able to talk about it and be open about some of the struggles you've had.
I think the most important...
You talk in the documentary about how what was going on was affecting your body and...
Nodding along there, if you had this under control, you have it all completely under control now, or when...
the ice.
Not bad.
And we'll be watching, I'm sure many will be watching the documentary tonight as well, Colin. Thank you very much for coming on Breakfast and telling us a little bit more about it.
Really good to see you, thank you. The Panorama documentary Sports Hidden Crisis will be on BBC One in England tonight, 7:40 p.m. and then, of course, on iPlayer after that as well.
It's a really fascinating watch. That is it from us today on Breakfast. We'll both be back tomorrow at 6.
We will.
Sorry.
Now on BBC One, it's time for Rip Off Britain Live.